want to hack the sky, you just need to fly high. It will be good for a while, but at the end of time I will be on your side. Whoa, please don't go too far. Don't go too far. If you want to travel miles, pack your dreams and thrive outside. I will be here for advice while you get into the wild. Please don't go too far. Whoa, please don't go too far. If you want to leave this world and just leave my heart alone in the dark, I remember we used to smile, but please don't go too far.
Good evening, Vacaville. This is the regularly scheduled City Council meeting, September 10, 2024 at 6 p.m. Do I have a roll call?
Council Agency Authority Member Stockton. Here. Silva. Here. Chapman. Here. Roberts. Here. Wiley. Here. Vice Mayor, Vice Chair Ritchie. Here. Mayor Chair Carley.
Here. And if you're able, please stand for a moment of silence. Councilmember Chapman, will you lead us in the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Any changes to tonight's agenda?
No, there are not, Mr. Mayor.
All right, do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the agenda. Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And approval of the minutes for the August 27th, 2024 meeting.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Got a motion and a second. Ms. Stockton? All in favor? Say aye. No presentations tonight, so we will move on to the consent calendar. Items 6A through E. Any member of the council or the public wishing to pull an item for discussion?
Did you say that any member of the public want to pull?
Yes.
Oh, great. I wanted to pull the item on the civil grand jury report. I don't have the agenda in front of me. I don't know what item it is. It's a civil grand jury report.
Yeah, 6D.
Okay, great.
All right, so we will pull item 6D for a discussion. So seeing, it'll come back here in just a second. So, yeah. Seeing all items A through E minus 6D, do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the consent calendar. Second.
Motion, Vice Mayor with a second. All in favor? Aye. And we will then discuss item 6D. Please come forward.
Hi, good evening. The consent calendar should have non-controversial items that really are not material. When the civil grand juries, they work hard. They put in a lot of hours to prepare their reports. I wish that this report would have been on a regularly agendized, instead of on consent. I almost couldn't make it today. If I wasn't here, then there would have been no discussion. And I think that's improper under the circumstances. The civil grand jury would report on the unfunded liability. And as you know, the city has several unfunded liabilities. This one takes the form of the pension, and then we have, there's two pension plans that the city offers. It's not just CalPERS, what everybody knows about. It's also a PARS, which is a second pension plan that miscellaneous workers get in addition to CalPERS. And then we have what we call OPEB. For members of the public, you don't know what that is. The city provides lifetime health care benefits to all employees and their spouses and children to the age of 26. It's an extraordinary benefit. Most cities in the state do not get that. And in addition to those types of benefits, in terms of calculating circling back to the pension, some of those special compensation that increases the pension, and those special compensation could be an employee gets another 5% because they speak another language. They get 5% because they have a post certificate. They get 5% or whatever percentages. And so the civil grand jury recommended that a committee made up of members of the public, council, all the stakeholders to address the unfunded liability as a whole. Your response, Mayor and the staff, is saying, oh, well, we had a committee, but that was just for OPEB. And I think it's important because sometimes the public and the stakeholders can come up with cost savings ideas. Unfunded liabilities, they are what they are, but that doesn't mean that cities shouldn't routinely evaluate what can be saved. And when I say when you evaluate, it's best to have some expert and independent consultant rather than staff figure that out, because inherently they're conflicted. They may like their benefits. They may have the incentive not to find a way to save money. They like the way things are. So I highly recommend that this gets agendized on a regular agenda, and that council, you consider creating the committee to address the whole unfunded liability. And the response to the grand jury regarding those special compensation, I think the city staff's response, I don't think you address what the civil grand jury was saying. They're saying the special compensation increases the pension. You should look at that. Yeah, is it by law? If there's special pay that includes in pension, that is a law. But you have the power, because you negotiate the compensation for employees, to assess that special pay. And to give an example, I did get some records from CalPERS. And so one particular employee that retired, their normal pay is $11,787 a month, but their special pay was $4,500 in 1 month. Sometimes the special pay was $3,000, but you can spike your pension by just getting a lot of extra special pay in 1 month. And now that's the basis of calculating their pension. And so these are things that maybe you don't even know. So when the employee union groups that represent their employees, when they say we're not being compensated fairly, I don't think anybody here, I don't know that you really know what's making up that number when an employee finally retires. And so that's why I think a committee is important. Let's just see. And it's part of being transparent. And I thank you, because I think I'm way over 3 minutes, but I think that's what's really, really important. And this is the civil grand jury's 3rd report. So it's been several years since the OPEB committee. So I encourage you to do it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. As a matter of discussion, and maybe Mr. City Manager, you might be able to weigh in on a few things. I think it's fair to understand, yes, this was not on our regular agendized. This was on consent because it was a response, so to follow a process. The city has followed many processes over the years, including having the committee that helped inform the prior council to set policy. And those policies have been put in place. There isn't 1 month spiking. The policies with employees are 3-year averaging. So no, I'm not going to go into a discussion.
Yeah, I'll just email you, Mayor, so you can. It's hard.
That would be great.
When
You
see
can
it
go
on
ahead and send
paper,
an email.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. But I think it'd be important to hear what we're actually doing so that it can alleviate some concerns, because, yeah, there is an unfunded liability and many cities do have them. But if we could answer some of those questions.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. I just wanted to address a couple items in there. One is the retiree medical. We do have a tiered program now. So we have 3 different tiers of retiree medical. The 3rd tier that was implemented at different times for safety and miscellaneous folks is now a big part of our employees. And it does not provide retiree medical for the entire family. It provides a minimum amount for the employee as long as they're enrolled in CalPERS and they retire from the city. It is not the same benefit as the other 2 tiers. That is something we've implemented with the bargaining units in the council over the last 12, 13 years that we've been working on this project. We have responded to the grand jury reports in the past, obviously, as was mentioned. This is the 3rd. Also, for pension spiking, there actually are laws about pension spiking. So any benefit that an employee receives in their pension is going to be a negotiable item. And that comes to the council. It's negotiated with the bargaining units. We have been moving to more flat amounts as a way to address that. You can see in a lot of our contracts, as you're aware of, because you've approved them. And that's been the direction. So we have been making strides toward that as well. It is regulated by state law, what is included in pension and what is not. There are some other pension systems that do a final lump sum payout of things like vacation. We can't do that. It's not allowed by law. So we don't have the pension spiking that some other systems might. Also, the PARS plan that was referenced is a closed plan. So no further entrance into that plan, and now we are working to pay off that plan. It will take some time, and it is an unfunded liability that is audited by our auditors, and our actuary can address that a little bit more.
Yeah, and I could just add some more information on just the progress made on the unfunded liabilities from the time that the first grand jury report was issued. And so at the time when the first grand jury report was issued on OPEB, specifically the unfunded liability that was mentioned, it was 124 billion. With the last update that we did on as of 2023, that amount was 74 million. So you're talking about a decrease of 40% in the span of 8 years. And OPEB, similar to a mortgage, it is kind of a fixed time where we have 15 years left to pay that. So it's not going to get addressed overnight, but that is something that there is definitely a set timeline or expiration date on when we would pay off that unfunded liability. Additionally, prior to the grand jury report, we didn't have a full OPEB funding policy. Then OPEB funding policy was implemented in 2015. And so with pension, you have to pay kind of the annual mortgage every year that's required. With OPEB, that isn't a requirement. And so prior to 2015, the city was not doing that. So you had this retiree medical benefit that wasn't being fully funded annually. We changed that to where a policy was put in place in 2015. And then in 2018, we were paying that full amount. And so all that helps to address that. And so there is definitely a plan in place. Like Jessica mentioned, we do get an outside audit to where they look at the numbers that are reported in our financial statements, agree with what's shown on an actuarial report. And although we don't have a formal committee, there is opportunity to comment. As council knows, that every year we take the unfunded liability presentation to council. It's an open session. We have a conversation or a presentation on all of our unfunded liabilities, and then an independent actuary is also here as well. And so it isn't a consultant that the city hires or a city staff member that is answering all the questions. We have access to an independent actuary if the public or council ever wanted to give any input or had questions.
That presentation is usually in June.
That is typically in February. And so they're currently working on the new valuation numbers. We have the one for PERS, but what we're waiting for is the brand new numbers for PARS and OPEB as of June 30th, 2024, so that we have the most updated information there. And so that in the past couple of years has been in February. I would expect it to be around that time frame as well.
And if you could just share some comments for the public on the fund that has been put together, for the unfunded, the trust. Can you speak to that?
Sure. So the city formed a trust. I believe it was in 2009 was when the OPEB trust was actually formed. And that's part of the annual payment that we make that is spelled out in the actual reports. And so the annual mortgage, there's different components to it. A portion of it is to pay for the premiums for current retirees. And then the other portion of that is to put money into the trust. And so those are the two main components to that, to where if you were to look at, the trust returns, because we always talk about investment returns, how did the fund do? Because that drives sort of how the unfunded liability moves. And so if we were just to look at 2024, I don't want to spoil the presentation that's coming up, but we had a return of over 11%, like it was 10 to 11%. And we expect that to be around 6.25%. And so in 24, when we do this presentation in February, we're hoping to have kind of good news on where that unfunded liability number moved for OPEB specifically.
Thank you. Any comments from the council? Councilmember Chapman.
Thank you. Question. Tier 1, am I correct in stating that there aren't that many individuals remaining at Tier 1?
That's correct. I think if we might have one left still active, all the others are retired.
All right. Since this did come from the public, I want to open up to the public for anyone else who wanted to comment about this item. Seeing none, I'll bring it back. And do I have a motion?
Approve 6D.
Motion and second. All in favor? Aye. All right. We're going to go ahead and move on to business from the floor. This is a time for the public to bring any issue that is within our jurisdiction that may not be on tonight's council agenda. Please come forward. Good evening.
I have to model this for the camera. Okay, so hi, my name is Margie Stern, and I'm a retired speech and language pathologist from Solano County Office of Education. And I'm here to thank the City Council for endorsing the upcoming Vacaville Unified School Bond Measure E. I used to be married to Ernest Kimmy, who is the namesake of the Kimmy Charter Academy. I have 2 children, one child who went through Vacaville Unified School District, another child who went through the Solano County Office of Education. Even though I don't have children now, I am still interested in supporting a bond measure for the children who are in school so that we can have successful students going through our program. Each one of you has personally endorsed the measure, and I'm deeply grateful. Our city hasn't built a new school in over 30 years. Many of our existing schools are very old and need upgrades and significant repair. Sadly, in the era of mass shooting, many of our campuses also lack vital safety measures to keep our kids safe. Measure E will build a new middle school that will alleviate overcrowding at every K-8 campus, provide much-needed modernization and maintenance to our aging campuses, and provide vitally needed safety updates and upgrades to keep our children safe. Thank you, City Council and City staff, for your partnership and support in supporting our public schools.
Thank you. All right, seeing no one else, I'm going to go ahead and close business from the floor and bring it back to item. Were you coming back up? Sure. Go ahead and come up for me.
So actually, I'm in the Travis Unified School District feeder pattern, and our school district is also seeking a bond measure, Measure R. And I want to thank Jeanette Wiley for supporting that measure. Travis Unified School District does not have a general obligation bond, and it's been that way for decades and decades. I don't even know if they've ever had one. But anyway, so we also have a lot of need for new infrastructure for students as well as repairs. But so just a comment, when you get your ballots and there's arguments in favor, arguments against on some of these measures like Measure E, like Vacaville Unified. I'm not in that district, so I don't really have a say. But just, reminding you and the public to verify the accuracy of the representations made in those arguments, because some of them are inaccurate. So for example, Measure E, the person's, I think it's a Solano taxpayers group, filed an arguments against it. And their first argument claimed that the first bond measure of Vacaville Unified issued were 40-year term bonds, and that's actually incorrect. And there's public information to look at the bonds that have been issued by a school district, and you can look at the terms. And my research showed that the longest maturity for those bonds was 25 years. So I hope, just encouraging the public to verify the accuracy before casting a vote. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close business from the floor, and we'll move on. And there are no public hearings tonight, so we will start with 9A from business. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the City Council. This first item before you tonight is at the request of council at your prior meeting. We have a team here to present an update on our city's fire fleet, and we're seeking council direction. Brian McLean and Chris Concepcion are here with the presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, and City Council. As the City Manager noted, during the August 27th council meeting, council desired a presentation on the city's fleet with particular interest to the city's fire fleet. Tonight, I'm here to provide that presentation, answer any questions, and hopefully address any concerns. First, some background. The city's fleet is comprised of almost 700 vehicles and equipment across 7 different departments within the city of Vacaville. All the maintenance is performed by our Public Works equipment maintenance supervisors and his staff at the city's corporation yard. Except for City Coach, which is funded through state and federal funds, and the utilities, which is funded through the utility enterprise account, the balance of the fleet, about 520 units, is funded through the general fund, the Equipment Replacement Fund. The Equipment Replacement Fund, or the ERF, is included within the city's budget, annually reviewed by the City Council and approved. The fiscal year 24-25 budget of the ERF is $2.3 million. To provide a better understanding of the city's fleet, I'm going to take us back to the Great Recession, which started in 2007. As a result of the Great Recession, the city's fleet was significantly impacted, like many city programs were, with highly constrained budgets. Mayor, you will remember during those years, there were some years that there was no funding allocated to the Equipment Replacement Fund. So fewer vehicles were purchased and replaced. And what happened was that overall the city's fleet aged and began to deteriorate. In 2012, and then officially in 2013, the Public Works Department took hold of this issue and developed the Fleet Life Cycle Report. The Fleet Life Cycle Report is a data-driven, detailed report of the city's fleet assets. A myriad of different data points are collected. The ratio between equipment acquisition costs and cumulative maintenance costs, projected maintenance costs over years, mileage projections, service life information and variables, equipment management recommendations, as well as an executive summary which is provided to the department heads relative to their particular fleets. With the life cycle report as the source of the data for the fleet and its condition, we then developed a 10-year funding plan. That 10-year funding plan is developed in concert with the departments, each of the departments and their operational representatives for their particular fleets. It is a back and forth that goes on for several months in the development of that funding plan to understand the variables that are particular to each of the different departments, their operational needs and the changes within their department's fleets that they particularly see. This 10-year funding plan is updated annually, and ultimately it's used to allocate those equipment replacement funds towards the various fleet replacements within the departments. The results of the life cycle report and the 10-year funding plan speak for themselves. In 2013, 42% of the city's vehicles were in need of replacement. Today, 2024, approximately 20% of the city's fleet vehicles are in need of replacement, well within city standards as well as fleet standards and norms. We developed a plan, we stayed to the course, and the fleet reaped the benefits of staying with that plan. Of all the assets, the city's fleet, within the city's fleet, the fire fleet stands apart. Fire apparatus are generally the most expensive equipment within the city's fleet. Prior to 2020, a Type 1, which you can see in the far right here, that type of engine, Type 1 engine, typically cost about $700,000. Today, that same unit costs $1.2 million. Additionally, compounding the issue is manufacturer build times have extended. Prior to 2020, we could expect delivery from order to delivery about 18 months. Now we're looking at 45 to 48 months on some of these particular units. Extended times in delivery certainly are impacting the fleet response and our ability to manage it, which we have a plan, and I'll discuss that shortly. Because of these dynamics and the costs, the specialized equipment within the fire fleet, I thought it was important to bring in a third party, an individual, a set of individuals, a consulting group who had the experience in managing large fleets, particularly with experience with fire fleets. To that end, we hired the Matrix Consulting Group. We set a scope of work for Matrix, which included to investigate our fire fleet, to develop a report, to look at the fleet composition, the specifications, our ordering specifications, the current condition of the fire fleet, compare the industry replacement standards that we're using to actual industry standards that they're saying, also the cost impacts of those particular items. Matrix brought a well-furnished team, including an expert from their fire department, a retired fire chief from South Lake, Texas Department of Public Safety. Over several months, Interviews were conducted with both public works staff as well as the fire staff. An enormous amount of data was collected, fleet composition, utilization information from the fire department, vehicle specifications, maintenance logs, vehicle disposal policies, maintenance and maintenance staffing, all the way down to what was the fleet software that we use to manage the city's fleet as well as the fire fleet. In August 2023, Matrix finalized the report, and these are the major takeaways. The fire fleet is appropriately sized at 60 units. There are 12 units that are beyond their life cycle for their class. Caution is recommended by Matrix at making a single large multi-unit replacement expenditure in the first year, as it would result in peaks and valleys of spending in future years. This is sometimes called the rubber band effect. Spend it all today, 15, 20 years down the road, you're going to have a spike in cost in the replacement of those particular units. What they recommend is the smooth replacement approach. And in that smooth replacement funding approach is a consistent annual funding allocation, and that was recommended by Matrix. Additionally, Matrix looked at fire maintenance, and based on their review of the fire fleet as well as the composition of the fire fleet, they recommended 1.51 full-time equivalent employees. And finally, they did look at our software, our Fleet Management Information System software, or FIMS, and it is an older software package, and they recommended a replacement. Taking into consideration the most critical apparatus as identified by the fire department leadership staff, 5 of the 7 of the apparatus units identified for replacement have been ordered. You can see here in this graphic, 3 of the medic ambulances have already been ordered. Delivery is expected in spring of next year. We have ordered a Type 1 engine at a cost of $1.2 million. We have ordered an aerial truck at a cost of $2.07 million. Those have been ordered. The dates on those particular vehicles, delivery is fiscal year 2028. $4.5 million in expenditures. Additionally, we have also ordered a Type 1 engine and a Type 5 truck. Those are being paid by Triad, the Lagoon Valley project developer. The Type 1 engine is expected to be delivered next year, and we expect the Type 5 truck to be delivered by mid-October of this year. In terms of replacement planning for future years, we've developed a funding plan and a schedule to address the other identified units in need of replacement. We intend to continue placing pre-orders with the manufacturers, which allows us to set aside funding across fiscal years. This allows us to pay the final payment upon that future delivery date of that particular unit, as opposed to paying the entire purchase cost up front in any one given year. With consistent contributions of $700,000 per year towards the fire fleet, there is a funding gap of $3.3 million across fiscal year 25 through 28. However, as noted by the Matrix study, using this smooth approach of procurement, we will avoid the serious pitfalls of significant funding peaks and valleys in future years. That said, this is a planning tool, and it is reevaluated annually. In terms of fire fleet maintenance staffing, the Matrix study, as I mentioned before, recommended 1.51 full-time equivalents. Today, we have a fire equipment maintenance supervisor. He was hired in March of 23. That's 1 FTE. We are in the process right now through the current operating budget, which you approved in June or July, became effective in July. A fire equipment maintenance lead is working its way through the labor group review, the local 39 group. That'll be the 2nd FTE. So we're already going to exceed the Matrix study recommendations. Finally, we have an individual at the garage who is in outer rate status right now, who is also working to maintain the fire fleet. This is near to our hearts in terms of the garage as well as the corporation yard as a whole. Safety is our culture. Stop, end of mic, drop the mic. We live it every day. There is no city vehicle that goes into service that is unsafe. If we find out that it is, it's pulled. There are some instances where you have a diagnostic light that comes on. It happens with our vehicles. The technician looks at it, does a diagnostic, determines whether or not it is a safety issue or not. If it's not a safety issue, we determine what part needs to be ordered. We order the part, we schedule a repair. If it is a safety issue, for example, it's a brake system, that vehicle is pulled. And that's just the way it works. Safety is number one. In terms of the fleet management information system, as I mentioned, the Matrix study did recommend a new FMIS system. And that's simply a very glorified work order system that collects a lot of information and details related to the city's fleet assets. Mileage, vehicle faults, idle time, fuel consumption, battery and other engine data, as well as all of the historical information related to work orders that have been done, repairs, et cetera, on those particular vehicles. That's what an FMIS system is. In June of this year, we identified a new FMIS package, and we are working through the procurement process with the Government Service Administration right now to procure those software and have those implemented over the next 6 to 12 months. Here's the summary. The city's fleet is comprised of over 600 units. The annual equipment replacement fund is approximately $2.3 million. The Matrix Fire Fleet Study did identify key issues, including vehicle life cycles, replacements, and maintenance staffing. Orders have already been placed on the most critical vehicles and their replacements totaling $4.5 million. This was done in close collaboration with the fire department command staff in the selection of those particular critical assets. There is a $3.3 million shortfall for the remaining vehicles identified for replacement. We do have a plan, we have a schedule, and we're working the plan. That plan is evaluated annually. Fire maintenance staffing, as recommended by the Matrix study, we're going to exceed that. We will be at 2.0. The FMIS system, the information system for our work orders, that is a procurement is already in process. And finally, there are no fleet life safety issues with the fire department's fleet. My recommendation, receive this presentation and provide direction to staff, and the fire chief and I are here to answer any questions or concerns that you might have.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. I'm going to go ahead and just start with one question. And I know that this came from Councilmember Stockton to begin with. The $2.3 million that is budgeted annually, has there been any increase over time based upon our increased costs?
It's been static.
I remember when we recovered out of the Great Recession and we were trying to dig ourselves out, but if we're chasing expenses that are $500,000 more today, that $2.3 million won't get us there. I don't initially see lights, but I will also then, real quick, just say the budget shortfall that we're seeing, that's the 3.3, if I'm not mistaken, if you go back to slide 9. Can you further explain what those shortfalls represent and what the plan is for that?
In red at the bottom of this slide, you'll see the shortfalls from fiscal year 25 through 28. You'll also see the annual contribution of the $700,000 toward the fire fleet. That's bolded in black above those red lines. In the green, you'll see the replacement vehicles aligned by fiscal year along with their particular vehicle numbers to the right of those particular vehicles. The bottom in the red in fiscal year 25 through 28, those are the shortfall figures, and the total of those figures equals that $3.3 million.
And that funding would become due in which years, or is that, because this is?
Those particular issues, or the cost of those issues, become relevant on delivery of the vehicles.
Okay. So if we're not putting money away for that, then we're short the 3.3 million, definitely by 2028.
I would say this, Mayor, in each of the years, we're evaluating each year of this plan. And so I expect in 26, as we enter the budget cycle, we will be pulling up this plan and taking a look at this plan, working with the city manager's office and the finance department relative to the city revenues, because this plan is going to be reviewed. It's a guidance, provides us an ability to be able to take a look at this, determine if there's any additional revenues that could be sourced, adjust the plan and move forward.
I'll make one comment, and that is waiting 4 years for delivery of a vehicle is absurd. And it seems like the costs, and I'm not sure, Chief, if you can speak to these changes and if you think that this is something that is temporary, because that's not sustainable across our country.
That is the one factor that is absolutely complicating the issue right now. When this plan was put together by Matrix, the lead time for a fire engine was about 18 months. I'm sorry, was about 30 months. The last fire engine that we ordered last month, we were given a lead time of 46 months. So we were hoping that it was the supply chain issue that, right after COVID that was causing all of this stuff, but it seems like the lead times just keep extending and extending. So what it does is unfortunately complicates this issue, if you understand what I'm saying. So if you look at the graph there, and I don't know if we quite answered your first question, is because of the long extended lead times, for example, let's look at the unit, the first one on the line there, type 1, the 745, right, that we ordered. So $315,000, close to $800 a year for the next 4 years is allocated to that one. We've already ordered that. So that's how we're budgeting it, is we budget for the next 4 years. So we budget 1/4 because of the 4-year build time. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It helps to understand how we're trying to smooth at the same time, be able, upon delivery, be able to pay for it.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
To tag on a little bit more, this also allows us to be able to procure multiple vehicles. So we're essentially pre-ordering, for those future delivery dates. And through the operating budget, the annual operating budget, we're setting aside those funds so that we're accumulating the necessary total fund for that particular unit and that future delivery date. So it allows us to be able to stretch our budget dollars.
And how does this impact the rest of the fleet? Hoping that you're going to say that the rest of the fleet is in consideration to this.
Always.
I used to have to see all your reports, and so I remember how this works, but I appreciate that. Is it, because of the potential supply chain, is there opportunities if we find that there is a need to be more creative? Do you have some creative ideas?
Potentially. Yeah, the fire equipment is basically custom made, and it's made to our spec. So, and it provides consistency to our fleet. And so we want to kind of remain that way. So one of the potential things that we could do is to kind of, it wouldn't fix the problem. I mean, this is not a problem that we can fix overnight, right? But one of the potential things that we could do to maybe stop the bleeding and address that lead time issue that's out of our control is potentially start looking for to buy maybe a used fire engine that is maybe 7-8 years old, to put into our fleet and replace one of our older fleets that's at the end of life for service that's waiting for a new engine.
So a strategy that provides a stopgap with a pathway that may help us along the way. Okay. The lights were all on, they all went off for a second. Not sure what happened, but Councilmember Silva, you were up.
Thanks for the report. Quick question. What is the average, or what's the average range, or what's the acceptable range for a vehicle that needs a part? So how long does it take to get a part to replace that? The one that sticks out in mind was like a air conditioner is down. So like, how long does it take to get that fixed?
It's all dependent on the parts supplier, and our ability to be able to acquire it. It could range. Sometimes we're able to get parts from Napa, which is down the street. Sometimes we have to order them from specialized vendors, for that particular unit. Last year we ordered a transmission, and that took a month or so to deliver. Smaller parts, usually easier to acquire. It varies depending on, what part we're talking about and what unit it's for.
I know like the reason why I asked, like certain businesses, they'll have like a centralized location. So if it's a larger company, like I used to work for Genentech, so they had their own stock room of all parts to back up. So that way there's a limited amount of time that piece of machinery was out of service and they get it up ideally same day. But as they move away from that, it takes longer, so I was just curious on that component.
A little bit more. The garage sources from multiple different outlets. And so we're typically, the mechanic will end up calling multiple outlets if you can't find it at the first vendor. We're trying to always, trying to, with any of the fleet, move them through the garage as swiftly and efficiently as possible. And so whether it's the mechanic themselves looking for the part or being assisted by back office staff making those phone calls to those particular vendors, that's our goal, is to move efficiently and effectively through that procurement process.
And the other question I had, so how systemic or what type of policy is there in place to deem a vehicle unsafe? Like you mentioned, for example, brakes, but is there like, airplanes will have literally every part like listed to say, hey, you're good to go, or you got to ground it?
It's a great question. So annually, we go through it's more than annually, but on a regular basis. But the supervisor, whether it be the fire equipment supervisor, the mechanic there, or on the other side of the house, the general equipment mechanic supervisor, we're always looking at the vehicles. We're pulling those records. We're looking for any systemic trends in the particular vehicle itself. We go through an annual process of actually going through, and this is part of that fleet, the life cycle study. We're looking right down to the particular vehicle. What's the trend on this? Are we seeing an uptick in terms of the maintenance? What are those particular areas? That's where the FMIS system and our system and the new system provides us some guidance. It's in the brake system. It's in the propulsion system. So we're always going through that process. We do have safety checklists, that we're going through, that the equipment maintenance supervisor is reviewing. And again, they're checking these vehicles out before we hit the road, with them. I can't tell you how much, how important it is for us, in the garage, right down to the mechanic level. They understand how important these vehicles are to the driver, to the passengers, both, whether it be for safety and the fire department or the police department, but also the public, the traveling public. We know safety is top priority for all of us. And so we make sure that we're complying with all of the particulars in terms of ensuring that vehicle is ready to go and ready to be in service.
Thank you.
Councilmember Stockton.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for council for allowing us to have the conversation. Anytime we have 3 ambulances down, it's a significant concern to our community. But I have to tip my hat to both of you for putting this together. I think you did a very thorough job. This packet was over 100 pages. It's very detailed. But I do still have a couple questions. I saw, and I'm not sure if it's page 67 or page 7, where you're talking about your management recommendations and your system for when to age out your vehicles based upon like the green, yellow, and red status with different, age, and then, the acquisition, the maintenance ratio, as well as, the different factors that you put in there. So when I'm looking at that on here, it says green, which is like no action recommended. It says 10 years or less, the maintenance to acquisition ratio at 90%, and the mileage doesn't exceed over 100,000, right? And then it goes through the next one, I think yellow, which is kind of like in the middle, 11 to 12, and then 90 to 110%, or mileage between 100 to 120,000 miles. Red is exceeds 13 years, 110 for the maintenance to acquisition, and then mileage of over 120. So I guess the question that I still have, based upon reading your packet, looking at the numbers, which is very detailed, I'm very appreciative, but I did speak with some of the folks that work with the fleet, and I still have some questions. So I know that we're replacing 3 units. I think you said 770, 769, and what is the other one? 770?
775.
775. Okay. So I'm glad that those were replaced. It looks like 769 was bought in 2012. Should have been replaced in 2022, according according to those factors. It's currently out at 73 over on Vacaville, and it has over 150,000 miles. So clearly that one needs to be replaced. Sounds like you guys have already did that. Similar with 770 and 775, but we still have 774, which is a frontline ambulance out at Station 75 in Southtown. That's in service, and in order to have that replaced, it has 188,000 miles on it right now. And in order to have that at the time that it's needed, it should have been ordered or replaced in 2022. So I recognize, that you're doing your best with the smoothing, because we don't want to replace everything right away at the same time and have to pay for it all at the same time. Chief, you took the words out of my mouth. Looking at some used apparatus that we might be able to save some money, I think is a great idea. But I'm also interested in whether or not some of the boxes that we have for our ambulances could be refurbished or sent and put on a new chassis to just kind of get us through the hard times until we can adequately to our feet. Is that a possibility?
As the chief mentioned earlier, in terms of potentially being able to source a used fire truck to be able to augment the current fire fleet, the same thing goes with ambulances. I mean, we are evaluating, it's called a repower or a rebox. So we're looking into those particular options as well. One thing I want to note, the factors, the criteria that you're reading from, that's from the city's fleet life cycle reports. And so again, going back to the matrix study, we used the fleet life cycle report starting in 2013 all the way up until just about this past year. The matrix study and the waterfall effect in terms of their schedule, their recommended industry standard-based replacement dates and times, that's what's reflected in the matrix study and for the fire fleet in particular. And so we'll be using, we will be using the matrix study and the recommendations that they have, that they identified particular to fire industry in terms of replacement schedule. And so moving forward, that's what we'll be using for the fire fleet, rather than the city's life cycle report.
So are those numbers elevated in comparison?
They're different. They're different. In some cases, it's very close to our life cycle report. In some cases, it's a shorter amount of time in terms of a replacement schedule. But that's why we wanted them to come out. I wanted a third party to be able to understand what we were doing and then tell us, what those industry standards really look like, because we want to get there. We want to get there. And again, I don't want to hit this too often, but we have a plan. We've already started ordering. We've developed a plan. We have a schedule. This is something that, like with the life cycle report and the 10-year fleet budget plan that we put together, we're going to evaluate this every year. As we go through and we have those discussions with the fire command staff and the chief about their particular needs for that particular year, or if there's been a change in the fleet status, hey, we're moving this one over here, don't worry about that one, Brian. Those are kind of those things that we're going to go through. So this will adjust. It'll adjust to revenues, changes in city revenues and the equipment replacement fund. So it's not locked in stone. Those are future years. We haven't got there yet. This just provides us some guidance.
So what would be the plan for unit like 784, which is out at Orchard? That has 128,000 miles. It's 2,000 miles from the old life cycle, which I understand. But it's supposed to go into reserve next year. So I appreciate that you ordered an engine last month. It sounds like you've ordered some more ambulances. That's great. But what's the plan with that? Because you're not going to replace that at the same time. So what's the plan for that one?
So it's really simple. It's on this list, 784 right there. It's to be ordered. And so that's one of those units that's due for replacement. So we know it. We acknowledge it. It's been identified in the plan. This is one of those particular apparatus that we'll be working with the fire department as well as the city manager's office and the finance department when we start looking through the budgets, for this coming fiscal year. Or we're working on it. We're working toward getting out of this hole.
When do you anticipate that you will at least get through, I guess, Local 39 or whatever it is that they're doing to look at the job classification for the extra mechanic? When do you anticipate that you'll get through that process and start advertising and opening to be able to hire somebody to get them in there to help with the maintenance?
Very soon. Local 39 has gone through and they've looked at it. There are a few additional classification specs that we want to be able to refine on that particular one. But we're very near. And in the midterm, as I mentioned, we have an additional staff member that I'm put into an outer rate status who is out there additionally helping to maintain the fire fleet.
Okay. And just a point of clarification, the job status to work on the specialized equipment that the fire department has, that's specific to like their pumps and different things like that. Can all of our mechanics work on an air conditioning unit or a radio or some of the other stuff that's inside of these vehicles?
That's a great question. So the National Fire Protection Association, NFPA, provides guidelines. They're guidelines. They're not rules, regulations, or laws. But to your point directly, any of our maintenance mechanics can work on fire equipment. The fire department would rather have NFPA certified individuals working on them because it provides a higher level of understanding of those particular units. And again, with our classification specifications and outlining those particular certifications, we are moving in that direction. We are augmenting our staff through this additional lead position to be able to get to that 2.0, which will exceed the matrix study recommendations.
So if it's 110 degrees out and there's an air conditioning unit that's down, anybody can work on that, correct?
Yes, and to that point, I want to make sure that it's very clear. I have been out there. I've interviewed staff last week and had a conversation, a very frank conversation about, how things are going out here. Are you having problems? The fire equipment mechanic supervisor. Are there any issues with getting assistance, from the other side of the shop? No, I have asked, for in particular situations for help, and they have helped me. So they're exchanging information. We are helping with parts order for the fire department on the other side of the house. We're working together toward solutions. We, again, going back to what I mentioned earlier, our role at the garage is to move those equipment pieces through the repair process as quickly and swiftly as possible.
No, absolutely. And I don't doubt that for 1 second. Is there any opportunity that the council may be able to invest in some of your mechanics to provide them the training to be certified like the 1 or 2, soon to be 2 individuals will have? Is that something that we could certify all of our mechanics to be able to work on all of the apparatus?
We're investigating all options.
Okay. That's all I have for now.
Vice Mayor Ritchie.
Okay. Well, first and foremost, I try to make sure I listen intently to Council's talk so I don't have to repeat stuff. First, I want to give it it's not really questions, more comments. I appreciate the staff, appreciate your team at Public Works and all of the fellow staff for everything they did at this point. I read the sucker 3 times. It's really important to me. Public safety on the back of Measure E. Those are 2 things I think are really important to Vacaville. Public safety, safe streets, and education. Those are things that make our communities so special. People want to live in an environment where they know their kids are be safe. If something goes wrong, they're taken care of, and their ability to be educated. So the fact that this, at the same time as Measure E, a little speech was here, is really important. Also, the fellow firefighters here, it really speaks a lot of volume. This is a community that they're passionate. Like, they want to make sure they have the ability to serve us to the best of our ability. And so, like, having their presence here is really important. If they didn't care, that would be scary. The fact that they're here and they care about their level of service and able to serve us is really important. Listening to the study, I read the circuit 3 times. I think we've been flat since 2013. Is that correct, Ken? On increasing to the replacement or the fund towards the vehicles, right?
The equipment replacement fund has been static at approximately $2.3 million.
Since 2013, right?
Approximately.
I just want to find a way. I think we're all rowing in the same direction. Like, we all want to see Vacaville go the same direction. I don't think we're fighting. I want to find ways where, looking at the report, yes, we have to smooth it out to not create peaks and valleys is the most appropriate way to do it. The fact that the chief mentioned the possibility of gap filling with used vehicles, that's something that I'll see about over the weekend. I really want to find out how we can kind of really elaborate that. A few things I saw, the Matrix study was amazing. So I'm glad I read that sucker. I'm glad it was done, so thank you. The money, when we have a vehicle, we have what's called a ghost fleet. Instead of having those funds, it goes to auction, scraps. I want that money to go back into a fund instead of the general fund. Like if we need to change. The cost of everything is more expensive. The Fed's about to drop rates, it's not gonna be enough. We have to live with the new norm. Things are expensive. If we're selling police vehicles, we have to have a certain fund that goes back into that. If we're selling stuff for fire services, if that money we sell in the open market, scrap, great. Put that money back into a fund that can help us backfill that offset. I want to find other ways to help fund this. I hate putting more fees on our residents, our citizens, and our developers, but as we're growing, we need to make sure that we grow with it. I think the average mileage for a paramedic was 15,000 miles in Vacaville. So as we grow, that's going to increase at a faster pace. So we need, with the FMI study, it's going to help us realize, hey, we need to kickstart this program a lot faster because they're responding to Lagoon Valley and hopefully the far edge of the D2 pretty soon. They're going to be putting more miles at a higher rate on those vehicles. So we got to figure out how to close that gap faster. Speaking of my district, we got to find ways to help fund this gap faster. One way is, are we doing cash on cash, Ken? So every time we purchase these vehicles, are we taking this cash from the general fund and portion of Measure E and just buying it with cash, or are we doing any kind of short-term financing?
I'm going to let the Director of Finance answer that question. While he's coming up here, I will say that on your first point in terms of the disposal of fire equipment and taking the proceeds and putting them into a fire account for future purchase of replacement vehicles, which was a recommendation from Matrix. We have already had conversations with the Finance Department and with Ken's group on that particular point, and they are working through that process to set that up.
That'd be awesome. I mean, say you get $100,000 for a vehicle, you debt finance it, scrap, put it back into a fund. That money that we get from the replacement costs help finance the next vehicle, kickstart for the first 26 months, 30 months of that life cycle. We can really find a way to use the money we get instead of going back in the slush fund, the general, right back in there. But it's okay when it comes to financing.
Yeah, so to go back to just the auction proceeds part, that does stay in the vehicle replacement fund currently. And so we don't sweep it and put it in the general fund. It stays in that vehicle replacement fund. What we haven't done, what Brian had just mentioned, is kind of separate out, like if a fire truck specifically sold, then that's going to go to a specific fire fund. But it doesn't get swept in the general fund. It just stays in that vehicle replacement fund. It can be reused from there. As far as the way that we've been purchasing these vehicles, it has been a cash purchase. And so typically, if we're able to, we'll prepay it because then you get the discount on it. The city has gone the lease route in the past. That kind of very first line item that you see where it says loan payment was a vehicle, I think, that was purchased 2016. And so we did a 10-year lease for that. And kind of to Brian's point earlier, this is not something where the plan just gets created and then we put it on a shelf and it sits there. It's constantly being looked at. And so we're even in finance looking at leasing options as well. That's still something that we're definitely looking at to see if there is a way to, if we need to buy the vehicles or procure them faster with the cost going up, we are looking at leasing options. And so it's not something that, like Ryan was saying, is set in stone. Like we are looking at all options.
As I was reading it, it's looking like the life cycle, the 10-year minimum life cycle, 20 years. Looking at the 50,000 miles per year as it might increase, just at what point we say, hey, there's going to be a hard stop to put the order in to kind of make sure that that life cycle is the right time. If we, at year one, we finance it, if we set it on a schedule, pay it off in 5 years, it's 50% of the life cycle of 10 years. So the second half of the ownership is free and clear. And let's say we put it for auction, we sell it at year 7, we have a little bit of window gap. Say we get $100,000 for it. That $100,000 could debt finance the next one we just bought for maybe, I don't know, 30 months. And I just want to make sure that we're going to have to be creative. The last one, probably get some calls about this, but as we grow, as we build houses, they're already expensive. Maybe we need to start thinking about a fee. Say for every 100 lots we have, if there's a $900 fee per lot, that's $900,000. If we're going to build, keep growing, that part of the city could help finance. There's a specific fund for every house that's built that goes into the cost. Hey, you're going to need more vehicles, more police and fire vehicles, more public works vehicles to service your area. Could we
Can I
investigate
just stop
that?
real quick, just if we can get to an answer on that?
Yeah.
The CFDs include funding, not,
They do, but the CFDs,
well, I'm saying there's already an assessment on parcels, so.
but true. The CFDs are no difference than a city, or sorry, a school district trying to build a school. They're not enough. It's a California problem. CFDs don't cover everything they need, just like money raised to build schools are never enough. So we got to start thinking above and beyond that to close the gap.
That's more of a comment at this point.
Yeah.
With CFDs are included in those fees, and that's already assessed that we put on the costs. Maybe Ken, you can speak to that.
Sure. So for the CFDs that we have in the city, I mean, for public safety, they can be used for equipment. And so those monies are kind of already factored in for that. It could be used for public safety operations. It could also be used for procuring vehicles as well. So
Are they enough?
when you look at the chart,
It was redundant. Clearly they're not. So I want to keep being creative finance. We got to figure it out.
Well, I think we do, and I appreciate your comments, because financing is a big deal. How quickly we can get to the order is a big deal. I hope that we're not spending $500,000 extra every year and with a 48-month turnaround in the future, or that we'll be writing letters to other people to get into this. I mean, you see where we're going?
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I see what you're saying. Councilmember Wyland.
Thank you very much for the information. It's great. Fact that there is a whole fleet that Vacaville has, and then that part that the fire is part of that big picture, but it's good to look specifically at the fire as well. A couple of years ago, I was visiting a fire station, and one of the ambulances was out in Sacramento for a repair because at that time we had no one at our staff that could to be the mechanic. So I'm really happy that we have someone there now and another one coming soon. So do we still have to sometimes send things to Sacramento, or are we able to service all our vehicles now?
We are still sending particular apparatus when they have a particular issue that we can handle at the courtyard in the garage. We are sending it out. It's called subletting. You actually want to do that. You want a balance of being able to address particular issues that you can within the garage quickly and effectively. And when you can't, when it's more costly and more time consuming, that's where you contract it out and you sublet it out to somebody who can more effectively and efficiently do that repair and return it quickly. There is, as we were speaking earlier in terms of the delivery times, the build times being longer. We're competing, the city of Vacaville's fire department is competing against all the other fire departments, California, with, these repair facilities, particularly Golden West in Sacramento. That is just a function of the ball game that we're in right now. What we're trying to do is be smart and intelligent in terms of selecting which of the units and what are the particular issues that we send up, as opposed to the ones that we can handle in-house.
All right. And then when we ordered the fire engine a year or two ago, I think it came from Minnesota or somewhere.
They're manufactured in Wisconsin.
Oh, Wisconsin.
Yeah, the Type 1s and the aerials are in Wisconsin. The Type 5s are out of Texas.
So were all of ours ordered from the same place, or you just said so some are from Texas, some from Wisconsin?
Well, so all of our fleet, our fire engines and our fire trucks are all Pierce manufacturing. So we want to keep consistent as far as our fleet is concerned.
All right. All right. Thank you.
All the same brand, if you will.
Thanks.
Councilmember Stockton.
Yeah, sorry, just a couple more. So if there's a shortfall, right, and there's a piece of equipment that you need, Chief, outside of Measure M, are there any other budget pots that are available for the replacement or to purchase these besides what you have budgeted in the fleet budget?
No, there isn't. I mean, that's when we had our budget presentation, kind of looking at that 5-year forecast. I mean, looking at this current year, we were talking about, we are looking at deficit spending. And so there isn't this excess revenue that you can dip into and kind of pour into this. It would be coming from reserves, or you would have to reallocate from somewhere else.
So how much money does our ambulance service make each year, roughly?
I think 6 million.
So so $6 million. So I understand that staffing is a portion of that goes back into staffing, but is that money being allocated to make sure that we're essentially, that we have the equipment that we need in order for them to provide the service that's bringing that money in?
So that $6 million that the ambulance, the revenue, the $6 million in revenue that the ambulance generates doesn't completely offset the cost of ours, including, staffing, equipment, and all the operational costs that go into the fire department. So it doesn't come close to completely offsetting. So we're not making any money, if you will.
So we're still,
we don't have any excess.
We're still in the red, even with what we get back based upon that. Less.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to the public for comment. I saw your hand, so I figured you knew that this time would come.
I appreciate it. Okay. All right. Funding sources. That was a great question. So on our tax bill, there's an item that says Vacaville city tax. It's actually not a city tax. It's a paramedic firefighter tax. It's a parcel tax. I think it's 12 cents on every $100 of assessed valuation. If I remember correctly, I think it's bringing in around 6 million, maybe Ken, correct me. So that is supposed to be separately accounted for. I just read the original ballot language. So that tax has to be separately accounted. My question is this: out of the 6 million, how much of it is for infrastructure like ambulances? Number two, development impact fees. Thank you. Now, development impact fees, we get lots of them for different reasons, including for fire, police, detention basins, whatever. And I remember looking at a report for development impact fees, and the city had borrowed from the fire, the fee for fire. And Ken, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe that loan was ever paid back. But what I thought in my head is this: you guys just approved an urban reserve. We have thousands of new homes that are coming in. You're busting through the urban limit line. These guys need to pay up. I'm so over these developers moving in here. They act like, oh, we pay too much, but they find 1,000 different ways to pass on their bill onto the homeowner. And I've been up here plenty of times complaining about that. So for example, they create a special district, and then they say, oh, they go to some special JPA that issues a bond. That bond money goes to the city to pay that developer's bill for development impact fees. And then who pays the bond back? The homeowner. Okay, they don't. So you guys, you have entered into development agreements many years ago at these lower costs. You need to open up development agreements and renegotiate new development agreements that you're creating as a result of the urban reserve. I'm sorry, you need to have these developers pay. If they want to build here, then they need to make sure that we have the infrastructure necessary to respond to calls. That's the bottom line. And if they don't like it, they don't need to build here. And I guarantee you, they still will. So I think you need to get tough, all right? And then you need to find out, where are the grants? Where's money? I'm sure there's money out there for this kind of stuff. So where is it? So I think, like, maybe you need to look at a grant writer or something, but I think you could find the money if, like, you really get creative. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to comment? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and bring it back to the council. And I'm not sure if you can answer any of those questions. I do think it's a fair representation. Lagoon Valley is paying for 2 apparatus. So I think that's part of development agreements, but maybe you can speak further to this.
Yeah, so specifically for Lagoon Valley, They are purchasing, as part of the developer agreement, a Type 1 fire engine that was ordered November of 22, I believe, and the Type 5 that's arriving in October of this year. And then as far as the grants that she had suggested, we had previously applied for, because we knew we were short funds as far as the truck was concerned. We applied for an assistance for a firefighter grant for a truck company, and where we were denied.
And just real quick, if a question on the ordering, because this is the unfunded shortfall that you're going to assess annually. I can say that one of the things that I'm concerned about is as we're deficit spending, if we're not paying attention to what our actual liabilities are, then we're setting aside deferred maintenance or replacement, hoping for things to get better without actually investing in it. I recall the 2.3 million. I lived with that a decade ago. Things cost more today. And so one of the things I think would be important to do is maybe assess what it really is going to take so that we're not chasing the shortfalls every year. Hope isn't a strategy, but I certainly hope that the price of some of this apparatus comes down a little bit, and or we get creative in the meantime. But I wanted to just comment also, is there a fourth ambulance that's about to be ordered? Because trying to read the final attachment, it does show a payment of $774 for unit 774 to be replaced. There is an allocation of 200,000 in 25 and 200,000 26. Is that anticipating receiving it in 26?
That's correct, Mayor.
Has it been ordered yet?
No.
Okay. Is there opportunities in the ordering process? Because I recall there were times when, even when you were doing a lot of this, it was how to get in front of everyone else's order. Do you have any plans for that? There are ways to do it, I know it, because you used to do it. Although this is being recorded, so you're giving away every secret. Just tell me, do you have a plan to do that?
Yes. We're going to do our best, Mayor. We're always trying.
Because everyone's competing for the same orders.
Well, that's exactly.
And so, example, if you order something and we look at a fiscal budget and everyone else is how can you be creative in getting in advance of somebody's fiscal year knowing you're going to order?
I'll give you one thing we do. As soon as July 1st, so council approves the operating budget in late June, second meeting in June. We typically have everything within all the departments. The Public Works has had those life cycle documents and those meetings with all of the departments and understand what those particular needs are and how we're going to exploit those equipment replacement funds for the coming year. And July 1st, as long as it's a weekday, we're placing orders. So we're getting orders in as soon as possible. As soon as we have the funding allocated to the city and to the Public Works Department, we're placing those orders and we're making those calls to the vendors, to your point, to try to get ahead of the line.
Well, everyone make sure that they get their Southwest flight 24 hours in advance. There's a reason, right? Trying to get to the front of the line. And I know you're looking for direction, and we'll see how this council believes we need to move forward. The anticipating and accelerating of that ordering, certainly with this plan, I appreciate the fact that there is a plan in place. Sometimes it's more effective to explain it. I do realize that this was usually something that has in the past happened at the staff level. The one observation, or actually the two observations, is one is I believe that it's important in future years to consider whether the 2.3 million is the appropriate amount, especially with inflation over time, and are we factoring that in? Otherwise, we set ourselves up for failure. And secondly, while I agree and I appreciate the shortfalls over the course of 4 years, I do believe that it's important that we look at what Measure M is for, and if this council also supports, my belief in that we need to set aside Measure M funding, and if it's not out of general fund, we need to begin to earmark that that's what it's for. We can always rearrange it. This council had no problems rearranging, several $1 million that was designated for a park. And so here's an example of something that's critical And I believe that while we may not have to look at the full $3.3 million in the near term, if we're doing it annually, we certainly shouldn't be getting behind. And so I would be supportive of making sure that directing the city manager to look at how to make sure that we're not then doubling our shortfall next year if we're not trying to maintain, I think, even our first year, which is $862,000. I would like to see that earmarked against Measure M. And there's some more lights on here, and I think Councilmember Stockton.
Yeah, Chief, what do you need right now to maintain the optimal service that Vacaville citizens expect, right? We don't live in a city where we only have 2 ambulances. We live in a city where we have 5, and people live here because of that. And it saves lives because we have that. So what do you need that you don't have right now that this council can help you with?
I think the good thing is some of the help is on the way with that new job classification that we're waiting on. So if we can rush that, that'd be priority number 1 as far as the maintenance is concerned. And then probably the thing that could help us immediately, like I said, as I mentioned before, as far as a stopgap measures, is to look at the possibility of replacing our oldest fire engine with something that's maybe 7 or 8 years old that we can get immediately and put into our fleet to help with lessen a little bit of the maintenance that's required.
And do you have any sort of estimated cost as to what that would be?
I don't. I mean, I'll give you a range of $400,000 to $600,000.
And that would provide the same smooth kind of transition so that not everything's getting bought at the same time?
It would have to be full. It would have to be in addition to, as part of this plan. It's kind of a stopgap type of thing. Just it buys us a little bit of time because of the extended build times that we're experiencing.
What about ambulances? Do you need any ambulances refurbished, or do they just need to be repaired, the ones that are broken, outside of the ones that are?
Well, we've got the 3 that are coming, or those, that's another issue that was, those ambulances were ordered, I want to say 23. Yeah, early 23, and we were actually expecting them to be here by now. And 2 of them have been pushed out about 9 or 10 months. So even their build times are going out. So I think the other thing that we should probably take a look at, I mean, as far as Brian had indicated, we should probably explore the reboxing, to help us with those build times, because that means that instead of having to wait the 18 to 24 months that's now the build time for a brand new ambulance, it could be as little as, I've heard that some of the reboxing can take as little as 90 days. So that could help us with some of those issues.
And is there anything that we need to order now, knowing that it's going to take 4 years to get, knowing where our fleet will be in 4 years?
Just that stuff has been ordered, and then the stuff's on the list.
And is there any safety issue with the public based upon the status of our fleet right now?
No, as Brian said, if there's a safety issue with any of our apparatus or our equipment that's identified, we pull that out of service. So looking back in the last 4 or 5 years, I know in the last couple of years, there have been a couple of instances where we've had so many ambulances out of service that we didn't have enough ambulances to drive around, so we had to take out, but we still had the 4. Instead of having 5 ambulances in service, we would have 4 ambulances in service, and we'd call somebody back from, or have to pay overtime to the shop to get that repaired as quickly as possible. But we don't let anything go out into the public that has an identified safety issue. Now, there was, did realize that there was some, in the recent past, I just found out that there was some patients transported in a box that didn't have a working air conditioner. That, to me, is a safety issue. So my personnel have been directed to pull that ambulance out of service and do not transport any patients in an ambulance without a working air conditioner.
And just, obviously the safety of our community is first, but also the safety of our firefighters that are actually using this equipment. Is there any equipment that needs to be fixed with them? I've heard of radio issues and people having to use pack sets and different things like that. Are they safe in these vehicles?
That's my number one priority. I would like to think that they are. If there are any issues that I'm unaware of, I'll talk to my deputy chief tomorrow and find out if there's any ongoing issues.
I'm going to add a little bit more to that. We have coordination meeting between the garage and the fire department and the fire department representatives for their particular fleet. We actually have that meeting Thursday afternoon, this coming Thursday. And those are the particular issues, that we're looking for. I mean, if we've not heard about it, that's an opportunity for the two teams to come together and identify these issues, prioritizing them, and then start knocking them out.
Okay, I don't know if there's any other lights. We'll have a motion.
There's a couple of lights here. Councilmember Chapman.
Thank you. I have a question. From the, when there is an emergency, we have the billing. Is it outsourced? Do we outsource the billing for our ambulance service? And if we do, what portion that's where we get the 6 million, what portion remains with them?
Yes, that is outsourced. The billing is outsourced to an outside vendor, and we've done that the entire time for the most time that we've transported. And I believe it is at 4.5%.
4.5%?
4.5%. That's market rate. It's actually pretty low.
Councilmember Roberts.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate all the information, the update. It's very informative for us as well. So when we get questions about it, I know that a lot of this stuff's handled at like command staff level and city staff level, but how often is this information disseminated to like the lowest level person that's working? Because I know back in the military when I was a private or a brand new sergeant, that one of the biggest frustrations we had was not knowing what was going on. Like, truck doesn't start, radio doesn't work, laptop's not working. And then we just sit there and be frustrated when command actually knows, hey, there's a big plan coming in, all the stuff's getting replaced, but it's still the frustrations remain because we didn't know what it was. So do you guys have regular communications to even the newest guy on the block so they know what the plan is for the equipment and what's happening?
Not necessarily on that particular thing, but I have regular station visits where I visit the stations and give them an update on everything happening as far as the fire department is concerned, as well as what's going on in the city. It's their opportunity to ask whatever questions they have of me. In fact, I just had station visits yesterday afternoon, and I have station visits scheduled for tomorrow.
And then for the Public Works Department, we do tailgates on a weekly basis. And we do tailgates not just with our equipment mechanics, but also with our back office staff so that everyone in the fleet section and right down to the office assistant understands exactly what's going on within the garage at any particular time.
And Ken, if you could just comment also on the paramedic tax since that came up during public comment.
Yeah, so the paramedic tax too also brings in, I think it's between $6 and $7 million annually. And then it is a line item on our budget. So we have a separate revenue account to track that separately. Since the fire department is primarily funded out of the general fund, we don't kind of create a separate fund to where the revenue comes in and we're breaking out like a portion, 6 million, because it wouldn't make a lot of sense accounting wise. And so we are able to tell how much paramedic tax we're bringing in. It offsets the fire operations budget, and that's kind of what helps free up general fund money for things like the vehicle replacement and that type of stuff.
Yeah, thank you. Councilmember Stockton.
One final thing, you said you ordered 3 ambulances. Is one of those for the new fire station, or are those just to replace the 3 that are over?
They're all replacements. The Lagoon Valley Station will not have an ambulance.
Okay, so it's just all replacements. Okay. So what I would like you to do, we brought up some really good ideas about utilizing a used apparatus, finding a used fire truck that might be able to bridge the gap, as well as looking into outfitting or refurbishing put a new chassis on, one of the ambulance boxes. I'd like you to come back with that if that's possible. That's what I would like council to do, is have them explore those options to see if they could strengthen, the fleet with the extended wait time. So that's what I would like them to do, is just to research that and then come back to council to see if that's a sustainable solution for us to get through these extended wait times. It sounds like Brian has a plan with the maintenance to make sure that these things are getting worked on as needed. But I'd like them to come back with that. We don't know what it costs to do those things, and I think that would be valuable information in order to determine whether or not we need to buy new or buy used or refurbish something that we have. Is that possible?
That's direction, yeah. I think that's fine.
Chief, didn't you say you guys already looking into that or no?
I just want it brought back.
As long as you're exploring it is those stopgap measures. It's like anything else. It's not every day that you're looking at want ads for selling an engine, but there is a market for that. And so if there are opportunities, it would make sense financially to be able to do that. Yeah. City Manager?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think the key thing here is, because these are all great suggestions, these are all things that our staff has talked about looking into and so forth. I think the key difference that we can certainly bring back to you as we collect more information on what those particular options or alternatives might cost is if we were to bring that back to council is when do you seek to fund that? Because those will be new costs that are above and beyond what are already in that budget. And so the decision at that point will be, when do you want that extra cost and where do you want that to come from, should that be the council's direction? So what I'm hearing from you all tonight is that, continue to look at and explore other options as stopgap measures. We can certainly figure that out as quickly as we can and bring that back to you. But then again, the question will be is when do you want, and when looking at that price tag, what's the desire of the council at that point?
Yeah, and I think it's important that sometimes opportunity comes to you at the right time, and then you have to figure out whether or not it actually is beneficial, or is it going to cost more money in the long run. But I think we're just trying to help be creative as a council to apply that funding. Clearly, the one issue is the deficit shortfall over the next 4 years. Can you speak to that as far as what that might look like? I mean, right now it looks like this first year is 862,000, and so.
Well, as Director McLean mentioned, it's a game plan, and we're evaluating that priority in relationship to all the other priorities within the fleet, as well as all the other priorities that the council has shared with us throughout the course of the fiscal year, as well as what the projected revenues and expenditures are. So I mean, these are all things that we put out a game plan, we evaluate it consistently, just like when we came to the council as part of the very first budget meeting. We asked you and said, it looks like we're going to be in deficit spending. Is this something that you want to do? And we will evaluate and have regular check-ins with council as we move forward with this to monitor things and see if we need to adjust accordingly one way or the other based on what's happening fiscally. We're going to be doing the same thing with this. And this is what, Brian and his team and the chief do. I mean, we're all talking together with each other to see what needs to be done and what's the biggest priority. And council is well aware of that, because we bring things to you like that on a regular basis, is that, here's what you've asked for, here's what we can do, here's what we can't do, where do you want to go? And so we will continue to do that with this particular plan. And so I appreciate what has been shared in the past and the efforts that have been made to correct that. A lot of work has been done by the group that you see over there to put a plan in place that takes care of an immediate need and looks at the going forward. The going forward part, is going to be a combination of different things, and we will continue to evaluate it. You have some very bright, talented people over there that are already looking at those options, and then some other ideas that were suggested tonight by council. We'll factor all those in and make sure that as we move forward, that we're not putting anything at risk, and certainly not the community safety.
When is that first funding gap of the can you say the number again? The number's not up on
Yeah,
the screen.
so the
Brian, can you
first,
pull up that slide?
yeah, it's 862,000 and some change. And obviously that's factored into how you're ordering and then when you're receiving over the course of 4 years. What I mean, if the council agrees with me, one of the recommendations I would like to see is that what we do is we earmark Measure M money so that if we have no other funding, we're also limiting its use elsewhere because we're realizing the future of this. What would your recommendation be?
So that would require a subsequent discussion because it's not on this
It's not
agenda.
tonight.
I mean,
But that's why I brought that up.
Yeah.
Was to
Understood,
be able to
Council.
make a decision today, not in a week or 2 weeks, excuse me. So you're telling me we cannot make a decision to allocate that 862,236?
It's not that, it's that we would have to direct staff to bring an item back from what we're needing to make the change for. That was the reason why I did it that way, because
Well,
we didn't know until tonight as far as seeking what direction it looks like, and that's what it looks like.
So that's what I would like then. Along with what we talked about.
Well, so those are two completely different things in my mind. And so if that is the direction or your recommendation, then I would suggest that, the first part, we can do that. That's an additional evaluation that we can bring back. But the other, I would suggest separating these two into two distinct motions for council to vote on.
If you have information related to what we directed staff, could that be talked about as it relates to the other issue because it factors in?
What I heard your second part is that you're directing, that you would like to direct staff to come back and allocate specific monies to address that financing gap. That is different than the other, and so that would require council to give us a mutual vote for that particular direction.
So, and
Start there.
and that's the point, is all the other issues that is just feedback. In other words, it's time in the future, start looking at more than 2.3 million. And that's something that's an internal policy that you can work on. Look, this has been an internal program. This has not been, this is staff level work most of the time. It's been brought to the council. I'm aware of that. But when the shortfall is there, and I'll just say it, we just spent a lot of money on a park. We're going to have to spend money on a detention basin. These are those unfunded, real important issues. Fire service, public safety, those things we need to make sure that we're setting money aside. I agree with you that a separate action item, which I'll let you make that motion. Everything else, I think.
I'll
can
motion
just
that
be
we bring
direct.
back an action item to fund the shortfall for next year for the fleet. And then it sounds like staff's already going to come back on the other stuff.
So that'll be a motion. Councilmember Wiley, you had your light on for a while.
Yes, I just have one question on the paramedic tax. Does every property owner pay that, or is that just only the people that have the CFDs?
Everybody does.
Everyone pays
Yeah.
across the city?
Yeah, that's correct. Yep.
Thank you.
Councilmember Roberts?
Yeah, hopefully just a quick question. This brought me back through the staff report, and there it has the fleet budget. And so the one that's on the screen right now, this is just particularly for fire, correct? Because I know on the fleet budget, it has the projected beginning and ending balances, and that's carried over from previous years what's sitting in there. And how does that affect this deficit that there is for the fire fleet? Is all the resources already accounted for in that total budget?
The $2.3 million for fiscal year 24-25, the current fiscal year, have been allocated. So they've been allocated to both fire and they've been allocated to the rest of the fleet, including Public Works, PD, et cetera. That fund, that budget is exhausted.
Okay, yeah, because I just saw the projected ending balance carried over from, or the proposed from 22-23 was a 3.7 million essentially.
Some of that ending balance is us going to do with the fact that we may place that order, but we're not actually going to be paying for it at the time of delivery. And so there's going to be a
ending balance
balance
already allocated
committed
for future years.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Chapman?
Thank you. You had mentioned Measure M, taking money from Measure M. for this purpose?
Allocating it,
Allocating,
not spending it right now, but
but allocating. We have been taking, ordinarily, this, the funds come out of the general fund and this fleet fund, correct?
So prior to the extension of Metro M in 2019, it was primarily funded out of the general fund. I mean, one of the biggest things with Metro M when we actually had that kind of extended is that we shifted to where Metro M currently funds of that 2.3 million, 2 million comes from Metro M, and then the general fund is funding 300,000. So that was shifted in 2019 after we started getting the new Metro M rate.
Councilmember Stockton, you had a motion?
Yeah, that we allocate that $862,236 to.
453, just to be exact. 862, 453. It's different in the presentation, so sorry.
Well, the fiscal year 25 allocation is what I'm asking.
Right. I apologize. I see what's on the screen, so I second that. Roll call.
So please clarify.
So the motion is to allocate out of Measure M in reserve so that that money is earmarked for making sure that funding will be available, because in 4 years, we're going to have to find 3.3 million.
Yeah. That's something.
So at least while we're looking at this annually, the motion is to hold that first year right now, it's a shortfall in out of Measure M, so that it is allocated for its future use. That's what the motion is.
But isn't money already allocated? It's not just we don't have that money hanging out there.
It's not
allocated right now.
It's not allocated.
Reserves.
In our Measure M budget, we don't have 862,000 just hanging out.
We had millions set aside for a park that we didn't build, so we can't.
But we voted on that.
Well, the point here is we're voting on being able to do that. That was the motion. So that's what this is. That's all it is.
So just to be clear, you're making a motion to bring back, and just to simplify, a discussion about future funding for the shortfall for the fire.
That's right.
Now, just as a thought, looking at only the first year, I don't know, if that's truly what you're after. So if there's something different, then it would be helpful to know that.
Well, I think what it is that we're after is that in 4 years, we're going to be able to pay for all this apparatus.
Like the first 2 years, but I'm just asking for the first one because we can vote on that later.
No vote can happen tonight in terms of allocating additional funds.
When we talk about it at our next meeting, which is what we're.
So to your point, bring back a discussion on this funding shortfall.
Correct, but I'm seeking direction from you. Is it to 1, 2, 3, or 4 years of that gap? And the reality is that whether it's 1 or 4, you will have to make a decision on where that money comes from or where it's. So that's the discussion that we'll have to bring back to you.
Perfect.
You have a question?
It's part of the discussion.
Yes.
Yep. An actionable item, hopefully.
It's an actionable item, and with the first and second discussion.
Let's talk about.
Yeah, she has the floor.
I have the floor.
Yeah.
Okay. So what if I'm just thinking out loud, allow the city manager and staff to come back with the best case scenario in allocating funds to improve the fleet?
Well, I think, Mr. City Manager, that's what we're asking.
Well, okay.
Well,
So
I'm saying specifically for fire right now.
So I don't have an answer for you right here, right now, because the reality is, and I don't mean this to sound anything other than just, business math. We currently do not have additional funds to allocate to this $3.3 million shortfall. So when we come back to you with the discussion about it, it will be with the more than likely recommendations of where you want to cut. And now that's just to handle this one. There's all the other priorities that council has identified for us and that we've been talking about over the course of this past budget and prior budgets with this council about what you're looking for. So that will be the discussion. What needs to be cut in order to do this?
Well, I think it's fair then just to bring the discussion back because that then would be an actionable item that the council could vote on.
Well, and we'll bring back some ideas for you to consider so you can take action.
Well, I think the key also is to start with, best case scenario on how to fund this to start with and what the impacts would be and what staff's recommendation would be.
Well, this was our recommendation.
Right.
And so if the council seeks, and we don't know this yet because there's not an actionable item in front of you, this is just discussion, is if the majority of the council wants to accelerate this, then we have to get creative and figure out a way to do that. The other alternatives that we've talked about as part two of the motion, with some stopgap measures, while they may be cheaper immediately, there's still an added cost above that. So there is a cost discussion that has to be had. And so we'll absolutely bring that back to you, but I'm just forewarning you that I won't be able to say, take it out of this fund because I don't have that.
That's fair. I think it's just important then to, now that we know that that we have a 4-year shortfall, we now see that this is a priority for funding. There's a plan and Matrix helped put the plan together. And if we follow it, we just have to figure out how we're going to pay for it. So your motion, just repeat it. So
To bring it back with actionable items to address the shortfall.
And I seconded that. So we'll have a roll call.
Mr. Mayor, we don't need a roll call vote. If you get a motion and a second, that's all that's necessary to bring it back for future.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you very much. Need to make sure we have a good plan, but there's no doubt that 2.3 million a year isn't cutting it anymore.
Mr. Mayor, excuse me, you do need to vote to do that, but you don't need a roll call vote.
So I just make the motion that staff bring back a discussion item to change the 2.3 million annual policy for a more appropriate funding amount for future years.
Second.
Okay, there you go. Is that good? Just again, make sure you clarify.
Does that include the other things that we asked staff to investigate so we make an informed decision?
We were already planning on that, so not a problem.
Yeah, I would hope so, but just because.
We don't, hope's not a plan. Remember that.
Hope is definitely not a plan. There is pulling $800,000 out of the thin air. Figure it out.
All right, next item.
I think we needed a vote, no?
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The final item before you tonight is a resolution of the City Council and a long-term lease agreement with Mango Materials. We have coming down Larissa Morris, Justin Cole, and Molly from Mango Materials herself here to make a presentation.
Thank you, City Manager Bush, Mayor Carley, Vice Mayor Ritchie, council members. Tonight we have a long-term lease and biogas purchase agreement between the City of Vacaville and Mango Materials. We have Larissa Morris from the Vacaville team and Molly Morris from Mango Materials to do the presentation tonight.
Hello and good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. As Justin mentioned, we're here today seeking your consideration of a long-term lease and biogas purchase agreement. So just a little bit of background on the property and the project so far. The city owns partially developed property at the northwest corner of the Easterly Wastewater Treatment Plant, which is located at 6040 Vaca Station Road. The property is part of the Old North plant, which has been vacant for more than 5 years, and the Utilities Department does not have a planned use for this site. The proposed location for the Mango Materials flagship plant is in close proximity to digesters, which produce biogas, making this land the ideal placement for this project. An exclusive negotiating rights agreement was approved by council in January of 2023. This is also known as an NRA. In implementing the terms of the NRA, the city then entered into a temporary lease and license agreement with Mango Materials in June of 2023. The current agreement contains provisions that allowed Mango Materials to transfer their launch facility to the property at 6040 Vaca Station Road. The launch facility has been successful, and both parties wish to proceed with a long-term lease, allowing Mango Materials the opportunity to construct and operate their commercial biomanufacturing flagship plant. This mutually beneficial partnership with Mango Materials can reduce emissions for the city by taking a waste product from the Easterly wastewater treatment plant and turning it into a usable product. So the proposed terms. The lease is proposed to span 15 years. Initially, Mango Materials did request a longer term, but under the Surplus Land Act, the lease has been limited to 15 years. Mango will provide a security deposit of $50,000 and will pay monthly rent of up to $11,000 a month for the first 5 years. $3,140 of that rent will be for the office building, and up to $7,860 will be for the undeveloped property. Once every 5 years, the city has the ability to reassess the amount. In addition to the property rents, Mango Materials will be paying an initial utility fee of $3,120 a month for use of all utilities, and a biogas fee of $850 a month. These fees have been calculated by city staff and can be adjusted if needed to cover additional costs until metering begins. Upon or before construction of the flagship plant, city-provided connections will terminate and metering will begin, at which time the biogas will be billed at approximately $75,000 a year, and the utilities will be provided by the independent providers directly to Mango. Until the construction of the flagship plant is completed, or until a fence is built around the property, Mango will reimburse the city up to $15,000 a year for actual expenses for property maintenance, such as landscape and weed abatement. Upon either the construction or the fencing, Mango will be responsible for all property maintenance within the fence line. As previously stated, this evening we're seeking approval of the lease agreement, but Mango Materials will still need to proceed through the entitlement process in order to build their flagship plant. Mango has the ability to terminate the lease at any time with 90 days notice to the city, and the city may terminate the lease for any material breach left uncured by Mango. And then upon any termination or expiration of the lease, Mango is responsible for removing all property from the project area within 120 days and restoring the project area back to its original condition. It is now my great pleasure to turn the presentation over to CEO and co-founder of Mango Materials, Molly Morse.
Hello all, thank you for having me today. It's great to be here and to see you all again. So as you might remember, I'm doing a little refresher and background on Mango Materials. We're focused on the plastic industry. So our product are actually these formulated pellets. And our company exists to replace polluting plastics with alternative, environmentally friendly materials. And now a lot of people think, well, we recycle, and that's great. We should all recycle, but unfortunately, we're not going to recycle our way out of the plastic pollution problem. So what we do is advanced biomanufacturing. We have these bacteria, and this is very unique, very futuristic. But these are needed to our bacteria that naturally produces biopolymer inside their cell walls. It comes out looking like a powder. So if you've been out to our site recently, you may have seen the white powder. But what we ultimately do is take that as a key ingredient to the pellets, which we then ship. So the pellets are our end product. It's what Mango Materials sells. But those pellets get melted down by others to make things like replacement for conventional plastic packaging. And now one of the unique things of this material is it can biodegrade in many environments as well. So even if it ends up in an anaerobic environment, like a wastewater treatment plant anaerobic digester, this material can biodegrade naturally back to methane. So we can conceivably close the loop on plastic this way. So this is our big dream. This is the big long-term vision would be that one day we could make materials and they could be anaerobically digested in Vacaville to close the loop on carbon locally. That's the long-term dream. Right now we're focused on taking the methane and making those pellets. And these materials, they can be also broken down in terrestrial environments like your backyard compost or industrial compost, or I talked about modern waste facilities. Even if these materials accidentally end up in the marine environment, they can be biodegraded there. They can be prone to breakdown by bacteria. So these materials are designed for the naturally occurring carbon cycle. And our company is unique because this is the material we produce is called PHA, polyhydroxyalkanoid. I'll spare you the technical details, but this is a new material and it melts and it flows a little differently. So one of the reasons we want to be in Vacaville is because of the location, because we work through the supply chain. There's a lot of education. There's a lot of partnering that happens. So you can imagine if we have these pellets and we ship them or give them to somebody and they make fibers, and those fibers have to be knitted or woven into a mesh that could then go into our clothing that would need to be dyed and then cut and sewn into a garment. So this is a huge, complicated supply chain. So these pellets get converted into a lot of different things that can go on the market. Since I presented last time, we have a number of public partnerships, including the Brazilian personal care company called Natura. This was current at that time, but since then we also have a partnership with Allbirds, the American shoe company. Stella McCartney has a vegan fashion brand, so these are some sunglasses made out of the material, and we see some fiber applications and 3D printing applications. You can imagine things like ocean probes that could be biodegradable. But what I'm here to talk about today is really biogas. So we believe that ultimately waste facilities are the gold mines of the future. So we did quite the search a while ago to find the ideal long-term spot for our company, and we are very thrilled to be asking for this agreement with the city of Vacaville. What we were specifically looking for and are looking for today is biogas feedstock. We need that methane to feed our bacteria. And it's currently not being used, so we will be paying for it, and that will be a local incentive to use that feedstock. We also needed a site, a physical site, and so this site at Easterly is not currently being used. We needed to people to help with our facilities. So we needed a location where we could, a lot of other bio manufacturing companies really struggle with hiring because they're out in the middle of nowhere using different kinds of crops for their products. We were looking for a place where we could transport our material easily because at the end of the day, the life cycle assessment is really important. So we wanted something that had easy access to transportation in terms of ports. And one of the key advantages of us is actually being in proximity of multiple international airports so that people can come and visit us from all over the world. And that's actually already happened to date with our launch facility and our current operations there. And I like to joke that we looked all over the place for the best site and the best biogas. And and that even through outer space, this was the best place. And people often think I'm joking, but we actually do have work to do this in microgravity environments in deep space. So this is some of my team members testing our process without gravity in space. So we're very excited to be hopefully scaling up in Vacaville at this site. Since we spoke last, we are thrilled with the operation of our launch facility. I know I've met a number of you out there and happy to continue to do tours. We had our ribbon cutting in end of last year. We've hired the local team, which we're very excited about, to help us for this little unit, but as it gets bigger. So this is a multi-stage project where we're scaling, we have our current temporary unit, then we're scaling up to embed our compounding facility there. We're retrofitting this facility and we're scaling it up over the course of time. And I just want to, in closing, mention some other things I wasn't considering when we chose Vacaville as our site. And we've been doing a lot of education and outreach type activities. And of course, I knew where Sacramento was, but I've been surprised in how many different elected officials either want to come visit us in Vacaville that aren't from this region. They just are in Sacramento a lot. And so Mango's getting tapped to represent either the bioeconomy or local domestic manufacturing or hiring or education from other groups. So it's sort of fun to, like, in peer groups, Mango's often being the point because they want the folks from Sacramento to be able to come and visit us, even though we're not in their district. And I just wanted to mention that one member who I gave a tour to said he's had this long-term career mission for the I-80 corridor to be the future of biomanufacturing in California. But he's like, but the Vacaville sewage plant, I never anticipated that. So it's been fun to be part of the solution. I would hope that this would be a very long-term, fruitful partnership for both parties. And with that, I would just like to close that we're very passionate about methane, this waste gas, and transforming it to something environmentally friendly. And we want this to be the headquarters for Mango, where people from all over the world will come to visit, to see this prototype, and then go back to their home locations to ultimately be able to license our technology. That's the big dream, the big vision. So thank you so much for your time. And I will turn it over to Larissa to close us out.
So now that you've heard the presentation, staff's recommendation is for council to adopt the subject resolution. And we are available to answer any questions if you have them.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is, having seen the time that you kicked it off out there and everyone to come out there, it's pretty evident that this is a very unique opportunity and it's world changing. And it's right here in Vacaville. It really does add a dynamic of when people say, well, what's Vacaville known for? Some of the most creative minds, but also the relationship between the city. And that, I think, is a testament to just what we're looking for and how we can accommodate new ideas like this and be creative. And so I'm glad that we were able to do that and appreciate staff's involvement in that and appreciate what you're doing. It'll change the world right here in Vacaville. Councilmember Silva.
Yeah, so thank you for the presentation. I'm really excited about this. One, I'm just a geek out on things like this. So as a professor of biotech and of microbiology, tell my students about you guys all the time, and they're like, wow, everybody's pretty amazed. It's also great to know that Vacaville has the best gas. So we got to get some t-shirts made with that and some bumper stickers. So my question really is, one of the things we talk about is not just the benefit to our environment through this innovation, and not just the technology that you've dedicated your career and contribution to is very admirable and very inspirational, by the way, to a lot of my students as well. You don't know that, but I can't even express how much they appreciate your story. But beyond that, looking at the workforce demand, where do you see the workforce demand, and how do more attainable roles what kind of attainable roles do you see locals who want to pursue something called biotech or this field that is completely foreign to them or may not be even welcoming to them? What kind of message would you have to those folks to help us sustain your vision and this impact on the world?
Did I do it? Okay, thanks. So my message would be that there's a huge range of options, everything from office administration to we've actually have a posting on our website for a biomanufacturing engineer. We're having a harder time finding that person actually. But we've hired multiple operators and we do workforce training for them. So there's very few groups on the whole entire planet that do something like us related. And if they are that closely related, we bring them from wherever in the world they are here. But so what we do is retraining. So we hire people that used to be bakers, people that worked at the Jelly Belly factory, people that, so anything from shift operators all the way up to technical support staff, probably some similar skill sets to what we were hearing back before, like mechanics and things like that. So I think if you're interested in biomanufacturing, there's very straightforward ways. There's also available programs within Vacaville and the surrounding community where you can actually get, as you know, professional training. But I think that is an in to the long-term like workforce of the future. And we actually have some programs separately from that to help fund Mango with the training for that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and open up to the public for any comment. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council for, do I have a motion?
A motion to approve.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Thank you. Happy to
Thank you very
host
much.
you at a future ribbon cutting ceremony.
Yeah, really exciting to see that what's coming to Vacaville. It's this year at the biomanufacturing, the Bio International. It was very enjoyable to share stories about Mango materials, and it really sparks a lot of conversation. It's like, it's nice to see real creativity actually have a roadmap to something that it solves problems. So we're glad you're here.
Thank you.
Yes,
I'm glad to be
thank you.
here. Thanks for having me.
All right, reports of city manager.
Nothing officially, Mr. Mayor, but I do just want to ride on the coattails of that prior item. Special thanks to Justin and Larissa and Molly, of course, and our legal team. This was definitely a group effort, but all the folks out there at Easterly, thank you for making Mango Materials partners and feel welcome and at home. This truly is going to be a game changer for Vacaville, and just part of that bigger vision that we plan on bringing back to council to give you an update on in October. So that's all I have.
Thank you. All right, reports to the city council. Councilmember Stockton.
Yes, I wanted to thank the city staff and the downtown bid for an absolutely amazing car show last weekend. That was absolutely phenomenal. It was so great to see so many people out there. All the businesses were busy. Every restaurant was full and people had an absolute wonderful time. The other event that I was able to attend was the VW Bug event out on Orange Avenue at the dealership. It was just a really well put together event. Got to see some old kind of like hippie cars, like, from Scooby-Doo and all that stuff. It was great. A lot of good people. And I'm just so excited to see so many really successful events that are happening in Vacaville for people to enjoy. So that's all I have for today.
Councilmember Silva.
Yeah, likewise, the downtown shakedown, I thought it was a lot of feedback I had was very positive. The small different issues that folks have, those are all fixable. And it was just really beautiful to see the diversity of interest in vehicles and different cultures and different music coming out. And I thought it showcased the future of Vacaville very well. And people are really looking forward to it next year. So I'm really excited about that. I know there's a presidential debate going on. I always felt that Vacaville is a microcosm of the drama at the national politics. But it doesn't escape me that tomorrow is another unfortunate anniversary of 9/11. And I think many of us who were alive at the time, because we are getting older, that evening, I think many of us can distinctly remember where we were, the sights, the feelings, the sights that we saw, and just me even driving to work. I used to work graveyards at that time. Just driving through the streets of Vacaville, everybody throughout our community coming together, supporting one another, supporting our country to come together as one. And I hope that we continue to see that we all have more in common as we move forward. And do the best we can to live the best life we can while helping out our neighbors and being respectful throughout that whole process. So thank you.
Councilmember Wiley?
I will just say that I was excited on the consent item to see the big heart that's coming downtown. So that's a great thing for more art in downtown Vacaville. And last Saturday, there was a special family day at on Travis Air Force Base for the reservist families, because reservists come in once a month and they're away from their families. So one time a year, they have the families come in as well so that they can see what the reservist does when they're here. And the big thing was to make families feel welcome and like the area around, and for Vacaville and Fairfield and all the other areas to welcome them. And everyone was very happy to be there. I talked to people from Illinois, people from Texas, people from Roseville, and other areas around that were close by too. But they were all happy to see what Vacaville has to offer as well. So I think it's just real important for us to have a great relationship with the base and to appreciate our airmen and all the other people in our military, especially this time of year too. So that's it. Thanks.
Vice Mayor Ritchie.
I was just going to address 9/11, and so Sylvia did a wonderful job. So keep it simple.
All right, seeing no more council reports, we're going to go into closed session. But before we do that, I'm going to open up to the public if anyone wants to comment. The item is a conference with labor negotiator. Seeing none, I'm going to close the public comment portion, and with that, we'll be going into closed session. Nothing to report out tonight. Good night, Vacaville.